Dear brothers and sisters, on the last day of each liturgical year, the Church celebrates the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe, Christ the King. So a little bit history why the Church celebrates the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ as the King of the universe. Pope Pius XI instituted this feast in 1925 with his encyclical Quas Primas. That means in the first, to respond to growing secularism and atheism at that time, that he recognized that attempting to thrust Jesus Christ and his holy law out of public life would result in continuing discord among people and nations. This solemnity reminds us that while governments come and go, Christ reigns as King forever. Dear brothers and sisters, during the early 20th century, like in Mexico, Russia, and some parts of Europe, militantly secularistic regimes threatened not just the Catholic Church and its faithful, but civilization itself. Pope Pius XI, with his encyclical, gave Catholics hope, and while governments around them crumbled, the assurance that Christ the King shall reign forever. Jesus Christ is very truth, and it is from him that truth must be obediently received by all mankind. Dear brothers and sisters, as we celebrate the feast of Christ the King today, the King of the universe, the solemnity invites us to look at who is the true Lord of our lives. In a world where there are so many kingdoms and powers that want to dominate us, money, violence, division, despair, the Church proclaims with force that Jesus is the King. In the first reading from the second book of Samuel, Israel gathers around David saying, "We are your bone and your flesh." They recognize that David, though once a shepherd, had been chosen by God to shepherd the people and lead them. This marks the fulfillment of God's promise and the beginning of David's kingdom over all the Israel. But David's kingship only foreshadowed something far greater. It points to a future king who will unite not only tribes but all humanity. So the Jews and Gentiles, rich and poor, sinners and saints. That is a king who will not simply rule a nation, but reconcile the world to God. In the second reading from Colossians, St. Paul presents one of the most majestic descriptions of Jesus in the entire New Testament. He calls Christ what? The image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, the one in whom all things hold together. It means that this is no ordinary king. This is the king through whom the universe was made. Yet, also the king who became flesh to dwell among us, who entered our world not with power, but with humility. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Whoever sees Jesus, he or she will see God himself. Paul tells us that God has delivered us from the power of darkness and transferred us into his kingdom of his beloved Son. The kingdom of Christ is not something we await for in the distant future. It is already begun. It is here it is now, and it will be fulfilled in future. It is here among us, growing quietly whenever forgiveness is offered, justice is pursued, compassion is shown, and truth is lived. And in the gospel, challenges our expectations. The gospel of Luke. Instead of showing Christ seated in glory, Luke shows him crucified. Instead of admiration, we hear mockery. If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. The leaders, soldiers, and even one of the criminals speak from a worldly understanding of kingship. I think for them, kingship means strength. Or many other people that think it's about victory, it's about self-preservation. But Jesus reveals a radically understanding about a kingship built not on domination, but self-giving love. His power is shown not in avoiding suffering, but in transforming it. His glory is revealed not by coming down from the cross, but by staying on it for us. And here, another interesting reflection in the Gospel of Luke, we met the good thief, the other one. So he does what no one else in the scene does. He sees a king in the crucified Jesus, and he recognizes it. The innocence, the dignity, the divine mercy, the radiating from the one dying beside him. This criminal, he only makes a simple request. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replies with royal authority, today you will be with me in paradise. Dear brothers and sisters, this is the King we worship. One who opens paradise to those who ask, one whose throne is a cross and whose crown is a sign of love, not domination. Because from the cross, Jesus reveals a different kind of power. St. Paul tells us in the people of the Philippians that Jesus emptied himself, setting aside divine privilege and humbling himself even to death on a cross. His power is not the power of force, but of self-giving love. He invites us into union with him, a relationship that appears weak probably, yet it's stronger than any earthly rule. And in that union, we share in his power, the power to heal, to forgive, and to serve as agents of reconciliation. It is also an invitation for us as a leader, especially in the parish, that how we serve other peoples like Jesus, not by dominations, but with humility. That may, through our relationship with Christ, we become strong and not dominating others because of our power, but by sharing his life and love with them. Dear brothers and sisters, in accepting the cross, Jesus entered into solidarity with the lowest in society. Who could be lower than a condemned criminal? Only the crucified Jesus, that he shows he gives himself to all, especially the least and the lost. not by imposing himself, but by offering himself in apparent defeat. Earthly rulers and at times even religious authorities assert power to achieve their own ends. Jesus, by contrast, exercises power through service, laying down his life for us. This is a very radical king that Jesus shows to us. Dear brothers and sisters, we are free to accept or to reject his rule. He will not compel us. He seeks not subservient subjects, but he seeks friends. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. That's from John 15:15. Those who accept his reign live as brothers and sisters in his kingdom, and is already present here among us. But the worldly daily tempts, it challenges us to follow other rules. There are a lot of temptations: greed, violence, indifference, cruelty, and everything. However, we are invited to accept Jesus' kingship. And it's not a one-time act. It must be renewed each day through deliberate choices, no by forcing. Living under his reign can sometimes feel discouraging, since his kingdom often appears incomplete or fragile in our world, or sometimes we don't understand the mystery of God's ways. A glance at these headlines confirms there is still much to do to make Jesus as our peaceable kingdom, to let Jesus to stay in our smallest space of our hearts, that we try and we strive every day to make Jesus visible into our speaks, our words, our actions, and our service and our relationships to one another. Not only in the world around us, but with the Christians community. But within, the most important thing, within each of our hearts. To allow the change which God's reign brings us to filter through everything we think and say and do. And also to let Jesus be part of our every interaction, every decision, every moment, and every place we find ourselves in must be submitted to the influence of Christ and must be received as an opportunity to experience God's reign in our lives and to share the blessings of God's reign with others. This is not about evangelization, You're doing evangelize to the people or tell them about Jesus' sense. But it's more on about turning our faith into a life-transforming practice rather than just an intellectual assent or some ideas about God. The most important thing is that for Christ to truly be in our hearts, in our world, therefore Christ must be monarch in individual lives in such a way that God's peace and justice. And also, let him guide us, become our friends and guide us, and we become the instruments, the channels of his love and grace, constantly, that flow through God's people into the world. Every time when we take our action in one moment, in one interaction, and also one step at a time. May God always bless us now and forever.